Well, not quite sure what happened to my intro again. The computer froze, of course, just as I was going live on air this morning. So good morning. You are watching Elevenses from Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. This is show number 190. See if I can get that video to play. Right, okay, there we are. Good morning and welcome to Elevenses. Sunday, 21st of November, it's show number 190. It's a fairly bright and sunny day at the moment here in London, not too chilly. My temperature gauge is showing double figures outside, which is nice. Clive and Cheryl have both looked in, so good morning to you. We have a fair amount to cover today on the show, so I'll crack straight on. If you do have any comments or questions, I'll try to get back to them whilst we're on air. If I can't do it on air, I will respond when we go off air. So do use the comment stream to drop me a line. So TfL look to earn less than they expected from the ULEZ charge. French bikers have mobilised again to protest against parking charges. Mobile phone use rules are getting tightened, and I'll explain why that had to happen. Tesla owners have been locked out of their cars by a server error. And we'll look at the Swedish cake brand, and which is coming to London if you can afford them. We'll take a quick look at the Honda Navi and ask exactly what it is. And then we'll wonder why somebody might buy a bike, ride it 2,800 miles, and then actually manage to sell it for a profit. 2,900 miles, I think it actually is. And then finally, we'll finish off with today's better biking tip, which is more about cognitive biases, how they affect our riding decisions and our assessment of risk. And we'll look at why it's so important to actually think about minor incidents and not just major incidents. So settle yourselves down for the next 30 odd minutes for Elevenses, which is on Elevenses 11 o'clock actually, isn't it? Oddly enough, Wednesdays and Sundays here on Facebook, and also out on YouTube as a recording. So right, okay. First thing then, what's up in the news? Well, you may recall that Transport for London have extended the ultra low emission zone, the ULEZ as it's popularly known, and it's covering now the entire areas inside the north and south circular roads. So unfortunately, I also happen to be about half a mile inside it. The indications from TfL just reported are that it will produce less revenue than was predicted. Now, they had anticipated that around 135,000 cars and vans a day would have to pay the £12.50 levy because their exhaust emissions did not comply with the new standard. But they say it seems that drivers have switched to cleaner vehicles more quickly than expected. Now, the move was anticipated to generate around £2 million a day in charges and fines for non-compliance. But the latest report suggests that, in fact, the overall revenue will amount to around 600 million less than anticipated over the next 3 years. 300 million less in 2022 to 23, 200 million 23, 24, and 100 million in the third year. The figures have been published in a 15-page report outlining TfL's financial situation as Mayor Sadiq Khan seeks further government support. Now, I'll just remind you, of course, that this isn't actually a Sadiq Khan initiative. It's actually a response to the conditions that the government set for bailing out Transport for London, which runs tube, bus and rail networks in the capital. So it's not a political statement by Sadiq Khan, as many seem to believe. It's actually a necessary response to the government's own bailout scheme to help keep public transport running during the pandemic. But the irony of the situation is that the scheme's actually done what it's supposed to do. As the report states, early indications show that the expansion of the ULEZ has been successful in driving the desired policy outcomes from the scheme by improving air quality, as we've seen greater compliance of vehicles and fewer journeys by polluting vehicles being made compared with original expectations. So that's exactly what it was supposed to do. The other possibility, of course, that is not flagged up quite so clearly is that it may not be that drivers have actually changed cars, but simply cut out journeys. In one report, for example, it doesn't have to be inside the ULEZ zone either. It's actually people who live outside it. One resident in Hertfordshire, which is way outside the zone, said he'd simply stop making journeys to events in central London. And he pointed out this would hit London businesses. Well, one response to that was, why not use public transport? Well, of course, if you happen to live close to a rail or tube station and your destination happens to be close to a rail or tube station, then it's a reasonable enough switch to make. But that does depend on the services running when you want them to. Buses and trains and tubes do run later than they used to, but it used to be incredibly difficult to get out of London late at night. It's a lot easier now, I have to say, but even so, if you're getting back into places like Hertfordshire at maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, you possibly will still struggle to get home from the rail station. And the other problem, of course, is the minute you start swapping from one form of public transport to another, then the overall journey can take a lot longer. And the final point that is often missed when people suggest public transport is that you only pay once for a car, whereas you would pay once for each member of a party making a journey. My old Serena was an 8-seater, so that's an awful lot of train fare. Anyway, the shortfall has been predicted to require bus routes to be axed. TfL are saying up to 100 might face the axe. 200 more would have frequencies of bus services cut, and diesel buses, which were due to be phased out, will have to remain in use much longer to 2037, which is a long time away. And also tube trains, which were due to be replaced with new stock, will actually have to stay in service until the 2040s. So the cutbacks could start as early as next month, and the claim is that it will risk a significant pushback from drivers who will actually get back into their cars rather than rely on failing public transport. But it does really, in my opinion, throw into clear light the lunacy of funding one form of transport by creating a charging scheme that penalizes people for using an alternative means of getting from A to B. Once you stop those people because you penalize them, you run out of cash to fund the first form of transport. The scheme also says that all new cycle and pedestrian road safety schemes would be ditched. Well, I have to say that given many of these flagship schemes seem to have served little function other than being flagships and making driving more difficult, I suspect many drivers and riders are unlikely to be too sad to hear that. All right, okay. Science of being seen. I keep telling you that about science of being seen, but it is for a reason. Many riders seem to be unaware of just how invisible they are on the road. Now, the photo I've just popped on screen there was taken by somebody called Bill Robinson. He took one of my online coaching courses earlier this month, actually, and he sent me this short video clip of an incident he had whilst out riding his bike. Now, I've asked for permission to actually reuse the clip because I think it's incredibly informative and explains why I talk so much about the problems of nighttime visibility and why I state that adding more lights won't always help rider conspicuity. Now, as I said, I've snipped a couple of stills while I wait for to use the video. But have a quick look at the photo on screen. Can you see there is a blur of light behind the camera? Now, if you look closely, and I'll just zoom in a little bit there, can you see the pattern of light on the road surface there? On the cross-hatched area. What's creating it? Well, the answer is we don't yet know. So there's the overall view. If I move to the next photo, which is literally just a second or so later, that is what was producing the light. It was that scooter, which was completely invisible thanks to the glare of the lights behind it. You can see the rider taking evasive action because Bill has moved to his right and into the scooter's path. It's actually pretty clear from the video because it's a head-mounted camera that Bill did check his mirror, but it must have been at the moment when the scooter was actually completely invisible in that first picture. Comments? Well, yes, the scooter rider is in the video riding far too fast and living on his or her reactions, but the rider's almost certainly thinking that because they can see where they're going with their bright LED headlight, other people can see them coming. But again, if we go back to that first picture, you can see that the lights of the scooter have simply blended beautifully into the background lighting. If you've got bright lighting conditions behind you, they won't help. So unless there is some spatial separation between your own lights and the lights behind you, which isn't going to happen on a straight road until you're literally alongside the vehicle that you're about to overtake, then those lights won't show up. And that's why I've been talking so much about using yellow headlights to differentiate ourselves from other vehicles, not just in daytime use, but also in nighttime for built up areas. So that's why I am pushing Science of Being Seen. And that's going out, as I said before, in December, 1st of December, 8 o'clock. You can book a ticket at the address which is in the header to this show, but you can also grab it from here. Let me just pop it in. So do come along, and if you haven't seen Science of Being Seen, do come along and watch it, and I'll explain about yellow headlights. If you have seen it, please, please, please pass it on to other road users, other motorcyclists, other car drivers even, anybody who might be interested in their own safety. Groups, clubs, whatever. I'm happy to talk to you all. Do drop me a line. Right, okay, moving on rapidly. What have we got? Jeff has said it's 6 degrees here in northeast Wales, but bright and sunny. Yeah, well, this is one of the pluses living in London, Jeff. Might have to put up with ULEZ, but we do get a bit of warmth from the city. Right, okay, so what else is happening in the news? Well, bikers in Paris were planning to stage a go-slow yesterday. It was a warning to drivers to expect congestion in the northwestern quarter of the capital. Now, this is part of a long-running campaign organised by the Fédération des Motards en Colère, literally translated to the Federation of Angry Bikers, and it's against parking charges for motorbikes and scooters in Paris. Bikes will have to pay residence charges. Now, the French are much more proactive when it comes to making their feelings known on matters that affect them like this, and this is far from the first protest ride that has been organised for Paris and other big cities. Results are often positive too from the rider's point of view. You may recall that there was a huge U-turn on the control technique, the equivalent of our MOT, that resulted from the protests or threatened protests by bikers, and it resulted in a direct intervention of President Emmanuel Macron, and that was just a day after the law was signed off back in August this year. Off the top of my head, other direct action protests I can remember includes protests around the country about the proposed total filtering ban that has resulted in an extended and longer trial of the practice in certain departments. there was a series of protests in 2015 after a proposed ban on older motorcycles in the capital. I don't know how that one went, actually. I also recall a stunt some 20 odd years ago, actually, where motorcyclists arrived early and took all the car parking spaces in a prestigious Parisian shopping region in protest against plans to force bikers to park in car parking spots and pay the same charges. Not surprisingly, on a Saturday morning, it caused total chaos as shoppers arrived and found nowhere to park. But riders handed out leaflets explaining their actions, and drivers were actually quite supportive. And the result was that City Hall was forced to rethink on that. So I've no news yet on how yesterday's protest went, but I would guess it was probably very well supported, given that it took place in France. Okay, so don't forget you are watching Elevenses. You can catch the show every Wednesday and Sunday at 11 a.m. You can also catch up at YouTube on my Survival Skills UK channel. Don't forget the all-important UK on the end, or you will find somebody sharpening Boy Scouts or something similar. Right, what else has been going on? Well, the other big piece of news from the legitimate activities point of view is all about how mobile phones are used at the wheel. Now, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps announced on Friday that laws which currently make it illegal to make a text or a phone call other than in an emergency using a handheld device whilst driving are to be extended to cover other uses of mobile devices. You may be a little bit surprised by this, but I'll explain why. Under the new regulations, it will now be illegal to take photos or videos, scroll through playlists, or play games. Meanwhile, the highway code will be updated to make it clear that being stationary in traffic still counts as driving, and the handheld use of a phone at traffic lights or in traffic jams is also illegal. To be properly stationary, the car will have to be parked at the side of the road with the engine off. However, just to confuse things, there will of course be an exemption, and that is a new exemption which makes it legal to make a contactless payment at a location like a drive-through restaurant or at a road toll. But this will only apply when the payment is being made with a card reader. You won't be able to make online payments whilst driving. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said too many deaths and injuries occur while mobile phones are being held. By making it easier to prosecute people illegally using their phone at the wheel, we're ensuring the law is brought into the 21st century while further protecting all road users. Not surprisingly, the campaign has found support from road safety bodies. Mary Williams, for example, who's the chief executive of Break, the road safety charity, said the changes, which coincide with Road Safety Week, were very welcome. The president of the AA, Edmund King, said, by making mobile phone use as socially unacceptable as drink driving, we're taking big steps to make our roads safer. For years, the AA has campaigned hard and helped educate drivers to the dangers from bad mobile phone use. A sort of rather more pertinent observation, I think, came from RAC's road safety spokesman, Simon Williams, who said, as our phones have become more sophisticated, the law has not kept pace. Well, this is the remarkable thing, really. Grant Shapps is talking about bringing the rules into the 21st century as if he isn't aware that it's actually almost a quarter of a century into that century now. Of course, mobile phones have been around for a lot longer than that, and therefore so is the problem of using them at the wheel. Now, the first commercially available mobile phones date from 1983. I had a handheld BT mobile. You probably remember those ones with the pull-out aerial. That was sometime around about 93, 94, I think. So the use of phones whilst driving actually has a sort of 30-year history. And what that means is a generation of drivers have actually grown up with using phones in the car. And it took a long time for the government to clamp down. So not surprisingly, it's been difficult to get people to change their behavior. It's become a habit that people think they have to take calls whilst driving. Now, I actually seem to remember an unfair dismissal case involved a van driver who refused to pick up calls from the office whilst driving was promptly sacked. So that was just phones that made calls, but what about the other activities that the other things phones can do? Well, the first sort of smartish phones appeared in the mid-2000s, and of course, once they were capable of doing more than just talk, it didn't take long before the car manufacturers actually saw the need to start connecting phones to the car using Bluetooth. And it's actually more than a decade since I commented on the growing trend for infotainment systems in cars, which in some cases actually forced drivers to scroll through multiple screens to swap between useful information, such as using the sat nav, and less useful information, like choosing your playlist on an MP3 player. And I was absolutely appalled when I think it was Ford actually introduced a system that allowed drivers to purchase MP3s on the move. These screens aren't locked out as you drive. They are still available to you. So the laws here have been a complete mess. You may remember the last round of legislation when it came in, the mobile phone ban. It was widely trumpeted that the police were catching drivers on the move using their phones. They were using cameras in cars, they were using fixed cameras, tickets were being issued, and they showed people doing things like twiddling with their sat nav and nicking them for that. But whilst they were quick to publicise those court cases, it seems that there was a bit of a loophole in the law, and this is something I only discovered a couple of days ago, and only because the new rules which are being tightened up. So under current rules, drivers are only banned from texting or making a phone call other than in emergencies using a handheld device. So it appears from everything I've read that right at this moment, it's still perfectly legal to take photos. It's perfectly legal to video with your handheld mobile phone. You can scroll through your playlist, or you can actually play a game on the phone whilst driving, all with your handheld phone. And that's because, as I said, the law as it currently stands only talks about texting and talking. Anything that's not specifically excluded is legal, which is bonkers. Another point that gets clarification is that sat navs and mobile phones using a sat nav app, so long as they're secured in a cradle, will be legitimate. Although the government advice is still unclear about whether you can actually touch the screen on the move, one lawyer says that it's interactive communication, transferring data, making a call, receiving text, etc., and physically holding the phone in the hand and driving, which is the problem. And basically, he says that it's police officers that need educating here as to what constitutes an offence of mobile phone use. And he said, basically, some officers I've cross-examined thought touching your phone in a cradle was enough to convict. So it appears it isn't. The implication is that you can touch the screen, for example, to accept a call or reject one, or you could perhaps change your route if your route turns out to be congested and the sat-nav says, do you want to take an alternative? You can tap the screen to say yes. But the onus is still on the road user, the driver, to use that phone safely. And there are other catch-all charges that could apply, including not having proper control of a motorcycle or a car. If you do break the rules and get caught for your handheld use, then a lot of people still don't realize what the penalty is, and it is a whopper. It's a £200 fixed penalty and 6 points on the license. And of course, if you're a new road user with a test pass in the last 2 years, that means you are caught by the 6 and out rule. Your license is revoked and you have to go back to the beginning and through all the test steps to get your license. That would be theory, mod 1 and mod 2 if you are a motorcyclist. Right, okay. So if you find this information useful, you can pop over to my Ko-fi page and support me over there. And I'm always happy to hear what people have to say about the show, so do drop me comments. The next story actually links to the first one as well, because, as I said, most people do tend to use their mobile phone as a sort of lifestyle accessory, I suppose now. But you have to be cautious about using a smartphone as a key to open and drive your car or start your bike. If you think it's a pretty cool idea, then take warning from the experience of Tesla drivers on Friday. A 500 server error took down the Tesla app, and it left drivers around the world locked out of their vehicles. Now, it's not known how many Tesla vehicles were affected by the outage, but the website known as Down Detector showed a large spike in Tesla server problems at around 5 p.m. on Friday, and it seems at least 500 drivers reported problems to that specific site. So the implication is a lot more were actually affected, and it's known that the lockout affected drivers from South Korea to Indiana. And of course, plenty of drivers took to social media to tell the world of their woes. Tesla themselves have stopped talking to the press, and they have refused requests to comment, although Elon Musk was reported to have responded personally to several drivers on Twitter. Now, Teslas do come with a key card, which is a wireless key, but of course many drivers don't carry them because they're relying on the phone app. And the phone app can actually be set up to allow the Tesla to start without an internet connection, but the default setting is that it needs that internet server link, and many drivers have clearly left it on that default setting. How long did it last? That's not clear either, but there were still reports of people being locked out 5 hours later. Elon Musk tweeted apologies. We will take measures to ensure this doesn't happen again. But the problem is we're increasingly reliant on apps that connect to the Internet of Things to make consumer products work. And it's a real downside of relying on the internet and the server. If there's no sort of independent capacity for your product to work, then that connection has to work 100% of the time. Now, I've mentioned the Swedish cake brand a number of times in recent months. Just a few days ago, it was their trial of bikes out in the African savannah for game protection purposes. But the electric motorcycle manufacturer is eyeing London as the possible location of a new showroom. Now, with the date for phasing out of new motorcycles firmly on the table and London ramping up emission regs, it's really no big surprise, particularly as year-on-year sales for electric motorcycles are up 170% this year over 2020. Now, in absolute terms, the numbers are still fairly low, but they are growing rapidly. There were 4,467 electric motorcycles sold to September this year, and whilst that is a relatively small chunk of the 92,500 that were sold overall, it's a growing proportion. So Cake's curious niche range of electric bikes may be arriving at just the right time. Cake were founded by somebody called Stefan Itterborn, and whilst the more powerful models are clearly motorcycles, one thing that you do notice looking at the Cakes is that they take little notice of the design factors imposed by a petrol engine. Itterborn himself said it didn't seem the best way to go about it. We decided to start from scratch and build motorcycles that were shaped by their electric motors and batteries from the very start. I was not then a motorcyclist at all, so I came at it all from a completely different angle. And one of those different angles is that he bolt on different configurations of accessories to produce bikes with some very different functions. So you can affix, for example, a rear carrier. You can add a basket, a 35-litre aluminium top box, a rear seat, even a surfboard carrier. Although I have to say I'm not quite sure how you get on with the surfboard carrier in the UK with a couple of meters of board swinging around behind the bike. I suspect a policeman might have something to say about that. Well, if they're tough enough for the anti-poaching patrols, they're probably tough enough for the urban jungle. However, I do have some thoughts. they do come with a premium price tag. Now, this particular bike, which is just going up on screen, there it is the Maca Flex from Cake. It's a bike aimed at the inner city commuter market. It's got a top speed of 28 miles per hour, so it's effectively a moped, and it has a 30-mile range, so it's not going to take you sort of to Glasgow and back on a charge. So yeah, definitely a moped, definitely inner city use. So how much is it going to set you back? Well, it's a fairly whopping €3,800, and that is just for the base model. If you actually want to start adding accessories to that bike, then the wallet takes quite a beating. The rack, which really is essential on a bike like that, given there is no carrying capacity of any sort. And if you think about the natural competition, would be a scooter with under-seat storage for most of them. The rack is €150. Now, it's a robust rack because it can take a passenger's weight. If, of course, you add the optional seat, the sort of basic pad for that costs another €100. If you want to put luggage on it, well, you can put bicycle bags, which are basically panniers, but they will need the plate adapter, which goes on top of the rack. So add another 100 for that, and then €290 for the luggage itself. If you want the top box to go on the rack, then the combo is €550. Now, frankly, by the time you've splashed that kind of cash, you could not only have bought a small car, which keeps the rain off, but you could actually have bought a low mileage middleweight bike that not only beats ULEZ, but lets you do proper long distance riding too. And of course, there's zero weather protection. Now, you're never going to stay as dry on a bike as you do in a car, but there's a reason that a scooter has bodywork. My second thought is that if it's a bike that's going to be living in London, which is where they aim at their showroom, then some thought needs to be given to the theft problem. I see no provision anywhere on the Cake to help secure it. The tubular framework, which does allow you to secure some fairly hefty chains, and you could presumably run them between the wheels and the frame, which would at least stop people just wheeling the bike away. But it weighs 150 kilos with 65 kilos, 150 pounds with the battery. So frankly, a couple of kids could lift that up and run off with it. I'm not sure how secure the quickly removable battery is either. I can foresee a fairly brisk trade in nicked batteries on these things if they start to become popular with delivery drivers. I hate to criticize anybody and stereotype, but if I were in the market, I have to say, for an inner city scooter with moped performance, the Super Socco CUX is just half the price. It's £2,249. You get the same speed, about 25% more range. You still get a removable battery, which is a little bit more secure because it is under a seat. You do get some weather protection, and you get an alarm featuring a wheel lock function installed as standard. Still won't stop somebody carrying the bike away, but at least it gives you a fighting chance. Right, okay. Anything else to say? Yes. We're running on a little bit longer than normal. I'm going to skip the next story because I've already overrun. Quick question for you. How much would you pay for a used bike? Well, the rider in this picture, chap called Alex, where's his name gone? Alex Jones. He paid £4,000 for that FJR 1300. It's a 2015 model. But he's selling it for $7,500. Why? Well, because he used it to break the Cannonball record for riding from New York to Los Angeles. He set the new record of 32 hours and 52 minutes for the 2,900-mile trip, which runs from Red Bull Garage in Manhattan to the Portofino Inn in Redondo Beach near Los Angeles. Of course, if you do buy it, you'll own a piece of history. You also get some essential touring-minded upgrades, according to the advert, although the 7-gallon fuel cell actually sits where the passenger seat used to be, so you're going to be travelling on your own unless you refit the original seat, which is included according to the Craigslist ad. You also get a better windshield, highway pegs for more comfortable cruising, a bunch of aftermarket lighting upgrades, and several phone mounts and power supply cables. And depending on how good your mental maths is, you'll probably have figured out that the journey averaged just under 90 miles per hour, which probably explains why you have a hardwired Valentine 1 radar detector and an adaptive TPX laser jammer. And you'll be glad to know you do get brand new tyres too. And Alex will be using the extra cash for other hobbies, he says. All right, so there you go, a Cannonball Run record-holding bike. Which actually leads neatly into the how risky a rider are you? Well, obviously, if you're exceeding the speed limit for 30 hours plus, traveling 2,900 miles in one hit, you're probably not sleeping well, you're probably tired, you're probably taking quite a lot of risk. Now, some years back, a test appeared, I think it was part of a PhD project, and it was asking some questions about how much risk we take as riders. It appeared on Bike Forum, and the generally experienced riders on that forum instantly dismissed it, and I quote, as bollocks. Why? And the answer was because their risk score didn't match their own ideas about how much risk they thought they were taking. Now, as it happened, my own level, according to the test, was medium to high risk. But are we wise to dismiss those results? Well, it's actually typical of how we respond to tests of this sort. If the results don't turn out to be what we think they should be, we all tend to think that it's the test that must be wrong. Even, we go as far as dismissing the test for asking the wrong questions or being biased and having an agenda. Those are the typical sort of biases that we have against these kind of tests. But what if our test result actually matches our expectations? Then we have a very different impression. We don't think the test is a good one. In fact, what we believe is that the test is telling us we must be doing all the right things because we've got the right answers. Now, think about the difference between those two perspectives. It's a funny thing, isn't it, how we can see exactly the same situation in a different light just on the result we get. So this is because we gather and process information by filtering it through our own likes, dislikes, and our experiences. And basically, none of us like to think that we are actually taking more risk than we really believe we are. So this is another example of a cognitive bias, something I mentioned last week. And we fall for these cognitive biases all the time. Okay, I don't know how good or bad the test actually is, although I did actually look up the guy's background, and he does have a degree in psychology. He does work as personal coach, and he does seem to be fairly highly thought of in his field. So chances are that he based the questions and the loading for the answers on statistical data as well as known risk factors. And so the survey questions are almost certainly based on a statistical analysis of a group sample and not on its specific individual rider risk. And the thing is, of course, with any test like this, we can get a high score, even though we can actually turn around and say we haven't had any crashes. But it doesn't mean that we're not necessarily in a high risk group. Just because most of us haven't killed a kitten yet doesn't mean that we might not kill a kitten at some point in the future. A crash-free record really is not a good indication of a good rider. And that's because from an individual perspective, serious crashes are very few and far between. So a crash-free record is not evidence of safe riding practice. We're actually seeing the effect of the roll of the dice. Now, when I wrote about this some years ago, a retired safety advisor, a chap called Norman Armstrong, jumped in on my post, and he made the interesting point that no lessons are learned from near misses or minor accidents. Thus, the probability of a serious or fatal accident occurring actually increases. And if you think about that, we tend to think of a a near miss where we actually avoided a serious collision as an example of our skill, rather than the fact that we were involved in that near miss in the first place as a failure. And you know, think about crash stories that you hear. How often do you hear somebody say, "Well, I have no understanding of how this particular person came to crash because they were exceptionally safe, exceptionally skilled. The sort of person we never thought would get into trouble." But what we don't know is how many times that rider had near misses or even minor accidents, because we simply don't treat them as significant. We don't actually record them. And in many cases, people think of near misses as actually part of the fun element of riding. So we actually need to be really objective about minor incidents, just as objective as we are about the major ones. And the best way to do that is to actually do what's done in industry, and that is write an incident report. Now, a good incident report actually gives a thorough account of what happened, and what it avoids doing is glossing over some of the aspects that we might not like to admit to ourselves. So here's a basic structure you can use. Describe the context of the incident, describe the incident in detail, explain why the incident was significant, mention anything about the situation that was particularly demanding that may have contributed, and explain how you are going to deal with the situation in future and how that will impact your riding. So it's a step-by-step approach. We don't want to write about what we think might have happened or should have happened. We're actually just simply sticking to the bare facts so we can be objective about our own role in what happened. Even if we're not proud of how we handled the situation, if we can think about what did happen and how we dealt with it, then we can get a much clearer and much more unbiased overview of the incident. And it's absolutely important here to avoid being judgmental towards others on this. Sooner we write these incidents down, the better, because memory will go fuzzy and we will very quickly rewrite history to suit ourselves as well. Okay, put 100 motorcyclists in a room, ask them whether they're better than average, and you can absolutely guarantee the majority will say they are better than average. They can't all be right. But the interesting thing is that those most confidently predicting that they are better than average are likely to be significantly worse than average. Those who are most cautious about their abilities are the ones who are most likely to be better. And this is where it really gets interesting, because it's the women who consistently underestimate their riding ability, and it's the men who consistently overestimate riding ability. If you want to learn more about cognitive biases, I can recommend Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's an easy read book for considering the topic. But there's a challenge for you, perhaps for 2022. Set up a reporting schedule for your minor incidents. So there's a challenge. Who's going to be first to submit one to me? I'll be interested to see if anybody does. All right, gone on just a little bit longer than I anticipated this morning. I don't know why I did. I thought I'd set the show up to run the usual 40 minutes, but hey ho, the stories I have missed out today I will come back to. Do let me know what you think about the idea of reporting on minor incidents. I'll be fascinated to know about that. And don't forget, the Science of Being Seen is coming up. I know I've mentioned it before, but those photographs I showed you earlier, if you haven't seen them, do go back to the beginning of the show and have a look at the photos of a motorcycle, or a scooter rather, appearing out of nowhere in the perspective of another rider. We'll cover that on Science of Being Seen when we get around to it on the 1st of December in the live webcast. Right, so that is pretty much it for today. Do stay safe if you are riding out there today. Enjoy the sun while it lasts. It looks like it's a nice day. So stay shiny side up out there, and I hope I will see you in just a few days on Wednesday. So from Kevin Williams, it's bye for now.